We have been reporting throughout the 2 years of the pandemic on what police forces have been telling us. They have been seeing a rise in the number of crimes motivated by hate in this country. Now, those reports and those numbers corroborated by new statistics from Statistics Canada. And John Northcott is here this morning with the latest story. John.
Heather, this is because of the lag time in the producing of these figures. The real picture that we are getting, the first real picture that we are getting of the environment created arguably by the pandemic and the effect it has had on many in this country, many of them the most vulnerable. We talk about a substantial increase in hate crimes, about 37%, but when we talk about hate crimes focused on race, it is truly dramatic. It's about 80%. And when we break it down across this country, BC is the most vulnerable to these sorts of attacks on its citizens, and it is the Asian community in particular. When we talk about the Chinese population, then followed by the Korean population, and then the Southeast Asian population that have been affected by this marked increase in crimes. We're talking about some 2,600 hate crimes reported right across this country. And for so many Canadians who see this as their home, have lived here for decades, in some cases generations, this is a disturbing development. Let's listen to one activist from BC.
As a Canadian, as a Chinese Canadian in Canada living here for 30 years, it makes me wonder why we haven't progressed far enough, that why this is still happening. And what makes me feel is I want to feel safe in Canada. I want to be able to feel that I belong to Canada. But the fact of the matter is the police report has shown this staggering increase. That means there's so much more work needs to be done.
2020, of course, saw a racial awakening with the killing of George Floyd, people taking to the streets, and the ideas around racial profiling, around discrimination was front and center for so long. But Stats Canada, looking at the numbers, suggest that perhaps people taking to the streets, people being empowered, raising the public awareness, in fact, raised the awareness amongst those who had racist beliefs, and it does seem that some of them, many of them, in fact, did appear to act on them. Worth noting that with this rise in hate crimes, and particularly race-based hate crimes across this country, in the initial year of the pandemic, the crime rate itself across the country overall dropped by some 10%. Heather?
So, John, what about solutions? What is the suggestion for what we should be doing in the country then?
Well, a lot of reasons. One of them is the overall empowerment. So you have a community that might feel vulnerable, might have come from a place where they felt vulnerable. There are language barriers as well, huge language barriers. When you consider there's some 200 languages spoken in this country, about 60% of the immigrant population speak some kind of Asian language. And of course, within those communities, they are not homogeneous. They break down in terms of religion, ethnicity, sensitivity, and whatever personal empowerment that community might feel. So a local MP in BC has an idea that she says should be done right across the country in terms of combating this. Have a listen.
I think the federal government needs to fund all jurisdictions so that they have a hate crime unit in their police force. This needs to be taken seriously. It needs to be resourced properly. People need to be trained to do this work, and it needs to be investigated. We also need to facilitate the process for people to report these crimes.
So the idea being around this, that with all the money and resources that are put into law enforcement across this country, looking at these numbers, this is an area that needs to be focused on, needs to be financed, and needs to have that awareness within police forces and the tools and the resources that the communities can feel safe, and then have a process that can be put into place and these crimes acted against. Heather?
John, thank you very much. Okay.